So we don't have to get a vaccination. We don't have to put a mask on. We don't have to stand 6 feet away from you at the grocery. In fact, if you tell us to do any of that, we're going to call you a fascist. That's tyranny, making me stand 6 feet away, which again, if you think that's oppression, you are letting me know you have never experienced oppression.
Finally starting a podcast to bring our message to the larger community, which is to say the world. Quilted Heart Chats has as its intention informing the world about the reality of DEI. There's so much misinformation out there about it, both intentional and unintentional. And we want people to be able to make decisions on the basis of real information. So we will be bringing speakers from all aspects of DEI because it's not just about the workplace, it's about lots of other things that we think people need to know. And once they know, they get to make their decisions about it, not have people give them misinformation, which leads to only one kind of decision that person giving the misinformation wants them to come to.
Part of the reason why we wanted to start this, because we want to take back certain verbiage that belongs to us. And we want to define it for people so that they stop defining it for us.
Yeah. Say what woke means. Woke became this really ugly word.
Oh, yes,
and what
it did.
Did you come up with?
What others keep erasing.
What others keep erasing. And didn't they start erasing it with a vengeance? Oh my God. My favorite stories is a woman who attended one of the sessions I did. At the beginning, I gave them a fact pattern to look at it. It had somebody trans in it. And she said, she raised her hand. She was sitting on the first row. And she said, I'm a Christian. I believe in the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And I don't agree with trans. And that's the way I'll always be. And I said, awesome. Okay. I said, but this isn't about converting anybody to any point of view. I said, my intention, what this was for, is to teach you what the law requires you to do so that you don't get your employer in trouble. Mm-hmm. So what you do between 9 and 5 becomes really important.
Tim Wise is one of the country's most compelling voices on culture, politics, and power, bringing 3 decades of experience to some of the most urgent issues of our time. A gifted storyteller and strategist, he helps audiences understand how we got here, what's at stake, and how to move forward with clarity, courage, and purpose. Wise has spoken at more than 1,700 college campuses and hundreds of conferences, nonprofits, and leadership summits, reaching audiences across education, business, law, public service, and media. His talks offer not only historical insight and sharp analysis, but also concrete strategies for shifting institutional culture and navigating today's polarized climate. He is the author of 9 books, including Dispatches from the Race War, Under the Affluence, Dear White America, and the acclaimed memoir, White Like Me, Reflections on Race from a Privileged Son. His work has appeared in Salon, The Root, HuffPost, and numerous anthologies and is widely used in classrooms and professional training programs. Wise is a frequent commentator on CNN and MSNBC, and has appeared in several documentaries including White Like Me, The Great White Hoax, and Vocabulary of Change with Angela Davis. He began his career organizing against the political rise of white nationalism in Louisiana, later advising Fisk University's Race Relations Institute and training professionals across sectors. He currently serves as Senior Fellow at the African American Policy Forum, contributing to public education and strategic dialogue on racial justice and intersectionality. Whether speaking to educators, students, civic leaders, or executives, Tim Wise offers a compelling voice for truth-telling, bridge building, and institutional transformation in a time that demands nothing less. Welcome, Tim.
It doesn't matter. Whatever you want to ask me, I'm good to go.
And that is you with no. Oh God. Okay, I'm looking. I'm trying to be as good when I grow up.
What would be like, Tim?
Yeah, just, I mean,
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you, Tim, for doing this. It is amazing to have you as our first podcast guest because, as you well know, we've known each other for a long time. And the first time I saw you at the University of Georgia, after you spoke, it was like, oh my God, who is this person? How could I not have known him somewhere else in my life? And after that, I started sending you from time to time just emails saying, thank you for being in the world, for doing what it is you do, because I know it can't be easy. And it's really kind of ironic that you would have been our first choice because your approach and kind of the vision that we had for the podcast are really in some ways at odds. Same sort of subject matter in a way, but we come at it very differently. You come at it in a way I never could because of what you've said time after time, which is this coming out of the mouth of somebody that looks like me is very different, going to be accepted differently than it coming out of the mouth of somebody like you. And I know you give up a lot to be able to do that work, but I think that was the thing that drew us most an appreciation for that, as well as not only what you say, but how good you are at saying it.
yeah,
Logic appeals to me, and you are just so logical, bringing things the way you do, not only the data, but giving it to people in a way that makes sense for them if they're thinking about these issues really, as opposed to being locked into an opinion, that they would be able to take and use and change their behavior if it needs changing. So in that sense, even though, we think of ourselves as sort of comfy cozy, we write cozy mysteries about DEI, having you as our first guest seems at odds, but the truth is it's not because your message is the one that we're really delivering. So we've got some questions for you.
Sure.
I'm going to give you the first one. And I know that you probably get this all the time, but I just wanted to start with it. What inspired you to do what it is that you do? And I think of what we do in terms of DEI, and I know that's not what you call what you do. You do anti-race work, really. The thing is, it's sort of the basis for all of it. All we're talking about is we want everybody to be able to be included. You do too, only you specifically carved out a certain group and said, y'all, you're messing with these people and you need to quit.
Yeah.
Just like everybody else is. So in that sense, sort of what drove you to do it? Because the life of an average white male in this country does not lend itself to getting down and dirty in this fight. Why would Tim Wise do that?
Well, I would love to tell you that the reason for that was, due to some superior enlightenment or moral sensibility on my part. I would love to tell you that I'm just that much smarter and more compassionate than every other white guy that ever lived. But I know that's not true. The reality is just I've been very fortunate. I've had some experiences and opportunities in my life to meet certain folks, learn from certain folks, be mentored by certain folks that I would venture to guess very few white folks have had. And if you haven't had those experiences, a couple things will be true. You will not see the things that I've been lucky enough to see. You will not know how to respond to the things that I've been able to see, whether fortunate or not, and you won't be able to really find your place in this kind of work. So for me, I mean, the short version is, look, I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. It's where I live again now after a 10-year sojourn in New Orleans, where I actually started doing this work professionally after college. And growing up in Nashville in the early 70s, I was my mom and dad both, but my mom primarily made the decision to send me to a preschool program, as almost all parents do with their kids at some point. But unlike most white parents who would have sent their kid to the preschool program down the road or whatever, I was taken over to Tennessee State University every morning, historically black college on the north side of town, a good, 10, 12, 15-minute drive from where I lived, to go to preschool at the TSU, early childhood ed program. So this was a program on a black campus run mostly by black women, where most of the kids in the room were black kids. I was one of only 3 kids in the room that were not, in fact, black kids. And what that, I think, did, and she did that for 2 reasons. First, I mean, she did it because it was a great program and it was a well-respected program. She also did it really 3 reasons. Second reason was she wanted me to be in an environment where I would not always be the norm, right? Because she knew that I was going to be in integrated schools starting in first grade in Nashville, schools that had only really been desegregated for a couple of years at that point. Because even though Brown v. Board was in 54, Nashville, like most Southern school systems, didn't really do much to integrate schools until the early 70s after busing began in 71. And I was going to be starting first grade in 1974. So this would have been 72, 73, that she sends me to Tennessee State to get me acclimated to what it means to be in an integrated and actually not just integrated environment, but an environment where I was the outlier, right? Which I thought was, for a 20, whatever she was, 24-year-old white mom in 1972, 25, it's pretty foresightful, right? And the other reason was she wanted to piss off her parents. So there's that.
Oh, okay.
So that was part of it. That was part of it too. There was like a way to tweak her parents a little bit,
Goodness.
But what it did for me that I think was important was it meant, number one, I was being socialized in that non-dominant environment. Most of my peer group and close friends were going to be Black kids. And I realized all white people say we have Black friends were usually lying. In the early days, I didn't have anything but that was sort of my friend group. And it also meant that I was learning to respect Black authority because, as I said, the women that ran that program are mostly Black women. So I was learning from to trust Black women as the first authority figures outside of my own family, really. That meant that when I got into those integrated schools, I was going to notice when my Black friends and other kids who maybe I didn't know yet, but they reminded me of the kids I went to TSU with for preschool, when they start getting treated differently, right? When they start getting punished more harshly than I am. For all 6 and 7-year-olds act a fool, but some of us were getting sent to the office and some of us were not, right? Some people were being given the advanced level material and some other people were being put over in the corner to read remedial level work, and we know who was who. I noticed that. I didn't notice it because I was a sociologist. I didn't notice it because I had some, deep theory of oppression. I noticed it because those were my friends. That's who I identify with. I don't know these white people over here, but I know these kids. Why are they over there? Why are you treating them differently? And I don't have the answer, but I'm asking the question. And I'm able to see that something is happening. That's not because I'm a genius. I'm 5, I'm 6, I'm 7 years old. But it's because I've been placed in an environment that's so radically different from what most white folks have had that it opens my eyes to certain things. Later, when I go to New Orleans, and there's other stuff that happens obviously before that, but later when I go to college in New Orleans and I'm in the city afterward, there are a number of things, people I'm meeting, mentors that I have. When I graduate in 1990, it's the year that David Duke is running for Senate. The next year he runs for governor in Louisiana, lifelong white supremacist, neo-Nazi, former head of the largest KKK group in the United States. He's running for Senate. He almost wins. He gets 60% of the white vote. He runs for governor. He gets, 55% of the white vote. He loses both of those races. But having been involved in the campaigns against him, I worked for an organization that formed to defeat him. I know in that moment, that was what convinced me, beyond just understanding the issues, that it was what I needed to do, because I realized that even though this man got 670,000 white people to vote for him in the governor's race and 605,000 in the Senate race, it wasn't as if there were 600,000 to 700,000 Nazis in Louisiana. There are not, but there were between 600,000 and 700,000 white people who were willing to vote for a Nazi, in spite of the fact that they themselves are not Nazis, because somebody had convinced them over the course of their life that Black folks were the cause of their problems. And I knew that that wasn't Black folks' job to disabuse them of that notion. That was my job of other white people. So from that point forward, I started trying to figure out, what does that mean for me? What are my obligations vis-a-vis my own people? Because I just felt, the only reason this Nazi didn't win is because Black folks saved us. Black folks were like, look, if it was up to y'all, you'd have had a Nazi in DC or in Baton Rouge in the governor's mansion. We're going to stop y'all just this twice, these 2 times. But from now on, it's on y'all. And at some point, we have to step up and help ourselves the way that we preach self-help to other people. So that was really what got me started on it, and having mentors at the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, Ron Chisholm and others, who were very patient with me as a young white radical, thinking that I had all the answers. And then I started organizing in Black and brown communities, mostly Black communities, and had a lot of Black women that were holding me accountable for a lot of my nonsense. And I learned to just have a humility and a willingness to learn and to listen to the experience of other people who know the system far better than I knew it. Even I'm talking Black folks in public housing that didn't have college degrees. Some of them didn't have high school diplomas, but they understood the way the system operated far better than I did, and far better than any of the professors who had taught me with those letters after their name, those PhD letters, right? And so I just I cannot stress the importance of having those teachers in preschool, those experiences in college, and those mentors afterward.
Mhm. It sounds like standing in your truth, the truth that you had lived, was an extremely important piece to build a foundation for you, which goes along with your ideas that when you know people who are of whatever group this is that's being kept out, it's a different story. And your mother, wow, is she still living?
No, she passed 2 years ago, and
Would she live long enough to see what you were doing?
she did. She did. We were estranged near the end for other reasons, having nothing to do with this. But
Yeah.
yeah, she was. I mean, my parents have never been anything but proud of who I became and what I do. And you know, if anything was unfortunate, it was probably that her pride in me sort of overtook her ability to just relate to me as her child. You know, I became this person for her, and that's a little sad. But that's I take that up with my therapist. I ain't gotta waste y'all's time with that. But but you know, but I'm grateful for, in spite of the estrangement, and I've told this to my dad as well, from whom I was also estranged, but who now I'm sort of in the middle of repairing my relationship with. You know, I've told them both that in spite of all the things that created real trauma and drama for me, I'm still grateful for the range of experiences that I had. I wouldn't be who I was if my mom hadn't sent me to TSU. I wouldn't be who I was if I'd come from a more functional home. I'm sure I'd be a really great accountant right now, and I'm sure I'd have a happy life, but I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing.
And look what we would be missing.
Yes,
My God.
yes.
All right, Renee, you throw something at him.
I will, but I just do want to follow up with something I've always said all the time when I'm talking to people. You don't, people are not born racist. They're not born uh, with a lot of prejudices and biases. Those are built in. And you're an example of exactly what I'm saying, because if you do the opposite, what if you try to build a person who actually has empathy, compassion, and a love for people and different cultures? What if? And now we know what. So,
Well, I appreciate that. I do want to stress that just because I had that upbringing does not insulate me, however,
mhm.
from the sort of teachings of my culture and my society. I still, and I've written about this in my memoir, White Like Me, and elsewhere. You know, I've written about the fact that I still have racist thoughts come into my head. I still have sexist thoughts come into my head, which I was also trained not to have growing up, but I still have them. One cannot ever fully escape the teaching of the culture. Advertising works, right? Whether it's trying to sell you a consumer product on television, or whether it's trying to sell you a racial stereotype or a gender stereotype or whatever. And so, so I still have those thoughts come into my head, as I think we all do. The difference being that, thankfully, I was counter trained as well. I was counter educated against that, and I was given, sort of like in this era where we talk about things in terms of vaccines, right? I was given, in a way, an inoculation against the worst of that by the way that I was raised and by the mentors that I had. And I'm very fortunate. And I'm also trying to be very humble about that, because I didn't earn any of that, which is why when people praise me for whatever insight I'm able to offer, obviously I appreciate that. I know I talk real good. You know, I've worked on that for a long time. But as far as my insights, I only have those because of this amazing range of opportunities that I was given to develop them. And obviously, yeah, I had to take advantage of those opportunities, and I tried to, and I feel like I have. But think about all the people, and this goes to your point of like engineering someone with empathy. Think about all the wonderful people out there who, sadly, potentially wonderful people who didn't have that engineering, right? Who didn't have parents who had the same foresight as mine. And my parents were messed up, like I said, in a million ways, but that's one thing they got right. And so when I look at those 600 plus thousand David Duke supporters, or I look at those millions of Trump supporters, there is a huge part of me, as I'm sure there is in most of us on this side of the aisle, that just wants to say, to hell with all y'all. Like, we don't want to mess with you. We don't want to know from you. And if your vote for this guy is hurting you now, we told you, we warned you, suck it up, Buttercup. It's on you. But at the same time, I realize, and I will say that stuff in the privacy of my own home. But when I go out there in the public square, I need to try to remember that these broken, flawed people are broken and flawed, but by a system that broke them and subsidized their flaws. And it's by the grace of God or the universe or whatever that I don't think the way they do. It's not shocking that you would have millions of people who have inculcated anti-Black racism or anti-Latino racism or Islamophobia or misogyny. No, that's not shocking. What's shocking is that any of us are able to resist it, particularly those of us in the dominant group, when it pays really well to just go along to get along, you know? And so I don't want to be haughty and like, look at me. I want to say, listen, we all ought to be more humble. If we think we know a little something, maybe we do know a little something, but let's be honest, we only know it because somebody taught it to us, and we're just lucky to have stumbled upon them and to have had them in our lives. And so if we know that, then we can be the person for somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, I can teach that to somebody else that maybe didn't have that upbringing. And if I decide not to do that because, well, you should get it on your own. Well, I didn't get it on my own, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for being, humble in that. But I tell you, when you said something that reminds me of our life, every time we come home, we always have to get deprogrammed or the inoculation is daily. Growing up in Black households, everything had to be, especially the age I am. I didn't grow up I was born when civil rights was passed, but I was just a little toddler.
Yeah.
And so by the time, to your point about school, having the integration, by the time I got to school and living out of the country and then coming back in, and now we're talking about people are integrated. And so for everyone in my peer review at that point coming into the United States, were new to this. I remember the discussions that people were having, but also, I came from other countries. I was always that person that was the minority. And so over there, though, it was just you're American.
Yeah.
It didn't matter whether you're what color you were, race or ethnicity. You're American and we hate you. So that was it.
Right.
But you really dovetailed into my question next, my next question, that is about this presidency. And with everything that you've done, everything that you've talked to people about, I'm sure at nauseum sometimes. What do you what do you think about things now as we are seeing things dismantled, history being erased, people being erased, and
Well,
then
yeah, go
the
ahead.
LA riots? So the LA riots. Wait, am I camera? The LA riots.
Yeah.
The uprising. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's definitely not a riot in Los Angeles. This is less of a riot than what we see on the typical college campus when their team is in the Final Four. Like we've seen riots. I'm pretty sure Dawn has seen stuff in Athens that was bigger than that before historically. I know we see it. We see it. Michigan State had a couple of riots back in the day in the late '90s. Washington State University had a big riot where they're throwing concrete at cops, sent 20 cops to the hospital back in 1998 or something. So yeah, this is not a riot. Woodstock '99, that was some white folks rioting. The Utah Winter Olympics in 2002, they ran out of beer. White folks rioted. This is not that. So let's be very clear about that. I think what we're seeing right now, though, putting aside the jokes about LA, obviously nothing funny about what they're doing, but it is funny that they're trying to justify it with these claims of mass violence and chaos. What we're seeing is exactly what we all knew was going to happen. I mean, this is what was advertised. To act like this is shocking, to act as if somehow this turn toward authoritarian and fascist type politics is surprising, and we didn't know this was coming. Well, what y'all think was coming? Like he was going to snap his fingers and egg prices were going to drop, and that was going to be like the sum total of his presidency. Obviously, the man said mass deportation. He was talking about everybody. Stephen Miller has made it clear since he was 16 years old at Santa Monica High School. He wants all the brown folks gone. He's not talking about people committing violent crime. He's talking about anybody that comes over the border undocumented. Because to Stephen Miller, who is running this thing, let's be very clear, it's not Donald Trump, it is Stephen Miller. To Stephen Miller, anyone who comes across that border without proper documentation is as guilty as if they were a drug dealer, a murderer, a rapist, or whatever else. So this is exactly what we all knew was coming. What I think we need to understand is that it is not this unique or unprecedented moment. And in fact, this is why I think they're so intent on trying to erase history, whether it's in textbooks or going after the Smithsonian for telling the truth and the National Museum of African American History and Culture. They're doing that because if you don't erase history, people might realize that what they're doing is just replaying 1876. Because that's what they're really doing. This is 1876 at the point where we decided to overthrow Reconstruction, right? We are now looking at the overthrow or the attempted overthrow of the second, or we might even say the third Reconstruction. You could say the second Reconstruction was the Civil Rights era. The third Reconstruction was the Obama presidency / Black Lives Matter movement. But whether you call it the second or the third, or whether you just call it all the long civil rights movement from abolition to the present, this is an attempt to overthrow that and to restore white male dominance the same way that the South did that beginning in 1877 with the overthrow of Reconstruction. So rather than looking to, and it's fascinating to hear folks do this, listening to scholars and smart people talk about this is like Germany, 1932. This is like Italy, 1925. This is like Turkey or Hungary today. No, it's like us, y'all, 1876. Why do you have to go to Germany? Why do you have to go to Italy? Why do you have to go to another country to find this moment? We have done this. Black folks have known fascism since the beginning. The fact that white folks are just now realizing, like, oh, we can do fascism? Ask some Black people, right? Like Hitler took his version of fascism, a racialized version of fascism, from us, right? He's the one who came, and his people looked at what we did in this country and actually concluded that in some places like Mississippi, they had the one drop rule, one drop of quote unquote black blood made you black, that was actually too harsh for them in Germany. He actually was like, that is some crazy stuff. We can't apply that to Jews. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like they were like, they are extreme over there in Mississippi. We're going to be rational over here in Nazi Germany. And, you can still be a citizen if you got like 1/4 Jewish blood. We'll let you be a citizen. In Mississippi, if Mississippians had been, if Ross Barnett and them later on had been running it, they would have been like, oh no, you can't. Oh, they're all Jewish. They got a great grandparent that's a Jew. They're
Yeah.
These were like, y'all need to stop. We're trying to be reasonable over here, and so the idea that this moment is unprecedented, it is not. The idea that this moment was not telegraphed, it is not. But for hundreds of years, white Americans in particular have tried to tell ourselves, we've been so bought into the idea of our own exceptionalism, right? The idea that those horrible things that we read about elsewhere can't happen here, that the system will hold, right? The system will hold until and unless you come upon a leader who does not believe in the system and only believes in themselves. And once they do that, all bets are off. And that's who this person is. So we are in grave danger, but it is not a danger that we haven't seen before. And we can learn from that, right? Because the overthrow of Reconstruction happened and it ushered in a terrible period of reversal of the gains that had taken place over just a couple of years. We now have the ability to head that off at the pass if we organize and mobilize and learn from that history. But if we keep ignoring it or if we allow it to be erased, then there won't be any history to learn from. And that's the problem we face.